Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Hello and welcome from us. Coming up later, a local authority in turmoil. We'll have the latest on the crisis engulfing one of the Tories' flagship boroughs, Kensington and Chelsea, over its handling of the Grenfell Tower disaster. I'll be discussing that in more detail with a Kensington councillor, former deputy leader of the authority, as well as with our MP guests for this morning, Clive Efford, Labour MP for Eltham, and the Conservative member for Romford, Andrew Rossendale. Welcome to you both. It is worth just picking up on comments to Andrew from Greg Hands, the Minister for London, where he says he won't be sending in a hit squad of commissioners. It's quite a big thing to put a council on special measures. Clive, what do you say to that?
I say that they've got to restore confidence of the local community, particularly the people directly affected by the fire. And they've clearly failed to do that. And what we've got is an administration in Kensington and Chelsea that have shown they've got an inability to be able to connect. And something's got to be done. So I support the idea of picking perhaps people from other local government bodies to go in there and provide an oversight of what's going on in Kensington and Chelsea to try and restore that confidence. And we've got to do that in consultation with the residents.
What could we lose from doing it? I mean, why not?
Oh, by all means, send in people that can help and experts that can help sort the situation out, because it's a devastating set of circumstances. But to go into an elected council and just shut it down and send in unelected commissioners, I don't think that's going to help anybody. I think that's more of a political gesture, and I don't think the government should consider doing that. However, clearly K&C have a lot to answer for, and they need to get a grip of the situation pretty quickly. OK, well, we'll have more on that in a moment, and we'll be joined by Daniel Moylan, who's a former Deputy Mayor of the authority. But let's turn now to knife crime. After years of it going down, it's going up again in London. This week, the Mayor, Sadiq Khan, launched a new strategy aimed at reducing it. His Conservative opponents said it was too little and too late. Andrew Crine reports.
Just to my left here is a children's play area, now a crime scene.
He was murdered here on the Monks Hill estate.
Now a 16-year-old boy has...
10 Londoners were murdered with knives last month, part of an escalation that's seen knife crime go up 11% in the last year. Behind each statistic, a personal tragedy. Dwayne Jones ran a boxing club in Brixton, helping young people off the streets, until his life was cut short.
I literally saw Dwayne 45 minutes before it happened. I just popped to the shop and said, I'll be back soon, son. I got back with the shopping, and only for 2 youth to say Dwayne's been stabbed. Went to the scene and saw my son on the floor having open surgery. It's caused me, I say I've now got a disability, which I have. It's not one that you can see on the outside, but I've got a broken heart. I'm going through trauma, shock, grief, hair loss. It's affected my whole family.
Today, Dwayne's mother Lorraine runs the gym he started. Part of their work is taking on young people referred by the police and giving them structure and discipline. Ants was sent here after he was found carrying a knife at school. The police eventually dropped the case against him, but suggested he try the gym. Knife crime is so common in London, Ants says, that between 60 and 70% of boys will have carried a blade to a school like his at some point.
Young people, some of them are scared for their lives because you never know what's happening. And people always, you know, you could be a good person, but something can always happen to you.
And it was here at this gym in the week when the Mayor launched his new knife crime strategy. It promises to give any school which wants one a metal detector, to increase stop and search, to name and shame retailers selling blades to minors, to improve coordination between organisations, and spend an extra £625,000 tackling the problem, taking the total to £7 million.
Now, Sadiq Khan says he wants to stop knife crime in London. Of course, that's a very laudable thing. But is it really what this strategy is going to do?
For it to work, the Mayor is calling on the government to reverse £22 million worth of cuts that have been made to youth services across London.
So them cutting down the funding regarding the youth projects, it leaves the kids without hope. So now you've cut their hope in half, you've cut their dreams in half, you've cut their self-esteem in half.
When we was growing up, there was a number of youth centres that were available to us, and that kept us off the estate. We were inside the youth centres, we had community leaders that we could speak to that had previously gone down particular types of paths.
But Conservatives have accused the Mayor of playing politics. If Sadiq Khan is really that concerned about youth services, they say, it's well within his powers to find the money himself.
When you talk about stopping knife crime, it's a great news soundbite. We all want to stop knife crime, it's very important to Londoners. But when you only give £600,000 to it in the context of a budget of 17 billion, you're not serious. The Mayor is not serious. He's saying things that sound good, put your money where your mouth is.
And questions too about the Mayor's record on stop and search. When he was running for office, he said he'd do everything in his power to reduce it. But now he's Mayor, it's going up.
There are issues around stop and search. It has to be accountable, it has to be transparent, and it's also very important that those officers who are undertaking stop and search do so in an intelligence-led way and are confident to use the powers that they have. And what we found with talking to young people is that their real issue with stop and search is how it's carried out.
And while the Mayor says his plan is an ambitious one, it hasn't stopped his critics from saying that it's too little and too late.
Well, watching me with that has been Patrick Green from the Ben Kinsella Trust. Welcome to you. Let's go through kind of three prongs that you think we needed here. Let's start early intervention.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? What's missing?
Well, it's something we just haven't done enough on. What we mean by early intervention is talking to young people right at the start, so stopping young people from offending in the first place. The Ben Kinsella Trust, we've worked with 10,000 young people over the last 5 years, and when we ask them why would you carry a knife, the key reason that comes up is protection. 99 times out of 100 they say protection. And there are two groups, if you look at it, there are two groups that sit behind this. One group of young people say they'll carry a knife because they're fearful of being victimised, they've been victimised before, they feel threatened. And they're young people, when you work with them, they do not want to carry a knife and they're looking for other ways out of it. So in terms of early intervention, you can work with those young people and help them find other ways and not carry a knife. For those, the second group are young people who are offending. They've drifted into offending and they're carrying a knife to protect themselves against other gang members who are offending as well. The work with them is much more intensive, but again, a social health approach, looking at all the issues around young people, that's really, really important. If you do that, you start to drive down knife crime figures.
Diversion, enough diversion?
We really need to invest in diversion, and what we need to do the first instance, which is the challenge we have now, is we've too many young people who are offending and coming in. Knife crime's up 24%. Hospital admissions are up 13% for knife crime. We've got a real crisis at the moment. So we do need to do a lot of work in terms of diversion, but we need to stop young people offending in the first place, and that's the early intervention work.
And finally, what enforcement? Do we need to get tougher?
We need to ensure that after all the early intervention, after all the diversionary activities, if you continue to offend, then enforcement has to be right and proper. So we have to ensure that the law's used appropriately at those points.
Well, have we got that right? Do you think there needs to be much more stop and search, because otherwise this figure is just going to keep on getting out of control? Yeah,
I mean, stop and search is an interesting one. If you carry a knife, you should do so in the knowledge that there's a high likelihood of you getting caught. Using police stop and search powers is the way to ensure that happens. We certainly need to ensure that stop and search continues. It's only one part of knife crime, has to be said, and it's not going to sort knife crime out by itself. But yes, intelligence-led stop and search, very, very important. And police are now wearing video monitors. That should make a big difference in terms of their interaction with young people.
Well, you've set out everything there. A lot to get our teeth into. Andrew Rossendale, let's start with you. Do you think police are going in and targeting enough people now?
No, I think that the police need to do a lot more, but we need to give them the confidence and the power to do their job. I find that even in my own constituency, which is outer London, we're seeing a spike in knife crime. It happened during the election, and local people are really worried about it, but they really want the police to go out and do their job and not be held back by any constraints. So stop and search is the right way forward, but I do think that you have to do it sensitively and it should be intelligence-led. But there's no doubt about it, the police need to take this far more seriously. There has been an uplift in knife crime, and it's unacceptable.
And would you just go wholeheartedly for that as well, Clive Ever? Then there clearly needs to be some more stop and search. Sometimes the police are going to get it wrong and they're going to annoy people who aren't carrying things.
But I think, as we just heard, this is not just about the police. There is a whole series of levels on which we've got to deal with.
And I will come on to those, but what do you say about stop and search and police action to begin with?
Stop and search on an intelligence-led basis. I mean, remember, there was a lot of consideration around stop and search following the Macpherson inquiry. When I spoke to my local police about that, they found that using the forms that they had to fill in, which this government has scrapped, actually did develop a lot of intelligence and recorded a lot of intelligence about what was going on at a local level. And the cuts to safer neighbourhood policing, where police officers got to know their local communities, got to know what was going on, could pick up intelligence, could pick up those incidents where gang members were preying on young people within the local community.
You're nodding agreement there. You'd say the same thing with you, Andrew Rossendale. You've noticed that policing.
I'm a London MP, as Clive is, and we want more policing. We want more resources for policing. And the Mayor of London and the government have a duty to make sure that our people are protected.
Do you think we'll get them now that, of course, the predicament and the precarious nature of your government at the moment?
Well, governments have to find funding for things that are essential, but equally so they have to balance the books. So all governments, whoever's in power, and I have to say, even if Jeremy was Prime Minister, he couldn't promise spending that the country can't afford. So we have to live within our means, but at the same time make sure that sufficient funding is available for essential things. And certainly I think in London, I think we've certainly can go no further in terms of cutting back on police.
Can I just take you up on this, Clive? Local councils may have had to cut budgets severely and cut youth services. To an extent, if he wanted to make a real point of it, it would be unusual, I'll take your point, but Sadiq Khan, the Mayor, could start putting up his precept to put money back into those services if he so wished, the council tax.
That would be a matter for Sadiq.
What would you suggest he did, though? You're very close with him, close ally?
I am a close ally to him, and he'll have a lot of priorities. So it's not for me to sit here and say which priorities he should give that money to if he chooses to put the precept up. But one of the things he is calling for in his strategy is more investment in youth services. And we went through this before when there were huge cuts in the 80s. I was actually working with young people at that time. And when we see cuts of this kind, the austerity cuts that we've seen, one of the first things that gets squeezed is the non-statutory services, and that is the youth service. And we are paying a price for that. We do need those people, those responsible adults within the community who can intervene and provide some guidance to young people.
Just a final word, Patrick.
Yeah.
Final word. What's the answer?
The answer is sustainability. We have run knife crime initiatives before. The central government have done it on at least 2 occasions. We have driven knife crime down, and then the ball gets dropped. Yes. Other things come along, and we get distracted.
But this time we've really got to stick with it.
Yeah, I do not want to come back here in 3 or 4 years' time and be saying the same thing.
OK, well, thanks very much indeed
Thank you
for
very much.
the debate and coming in. Thanks very much. Now, tenants in blocks next to Grenfell Tower won't have to pay rent until at least the end of the year, it's been announced. They've been without hot water since that fire. The move by Kensington and Chelsea Council looked like a first step in trying to restore credibility among its residents after another very difficult week. Councillors clashed with the press over a closed meeting. The leader and his deputy both resigned, and the talk turned to bring in a task force, as we've been hearing, sending one in to sort out the mess. Tanja Rashed takes through us events.
Is this the first good decision you've made, Mr. Paget Brown?
On Friday, the leader of Kensington and Chelsea Council made his exit from politics over his response to the Grenfell Tower tragedy. Pressure had been mounting on Councillor Paget Brown ever since protesters stormed the town hall in anger at what they considered an inadequate response. And his decision to cut short Friday's cabinet meeting, the first since the fire 2 weeks ago, earned him a rebuke from Downing Street.
I have therefore decided to step down as leader of the council as soon as a successor is in place. They will appoint a new deputy leader and cabinet.
But that's not what the Mayor Sadiq Khan wants. In a statement, he said,
"The government needs to get a grip and immediately act to appoint commissioners to take over the running of Kensington and Chelsea Council."
Buildings in 8 local authorities in the capital have failed safety tests, and hundreds of residents in the Chalcots estate in Camden have been evacuated.
There were problems with gas pipe insulation, there were stairways that were not accessible, there were breaches of internal walls, and most astonishingly, there were hundreds literally hundreds of fire doors missing. The estimate by Camden Council itself is that they need at least 1,000 fire doors.
In this atmosphere of intense scrutiny of councils across London, it now falls on Mr Javid to decide whether or not to appoint commissioners to take over in Kensington and Chelsea. Yesterday he said he will be keeping a close eye on the situation.
Well, joining me now, as advertised, Daniel Moylan, former deputy leader of Kensington and Chelsea. You're still a councillor there, and of course you were an advisor to Boris Johnson. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
What would you have done differently in terms of the aftermath if you had been the deputy leader?
Oh, I'm not claiming that I would have done anything better or differently. I think the important point to start with in any discussion of this is that the council did let people down. There were heroic actions on behalf of individual council officers, but the overall organisation let people down. The Prime Minister said it was a failure of the state at every level.
And what was wrong? Because you'll have had to, locally, you'd have had an idea of the detail. What was wrong?
There's going to be an inquiry.
Give us an idea of what you feel was wrong.
There's going to be an inquiry about all of that, but the council was overwhelmed by the scale and didn't recognise sufficiently early that it was being overwhelmed.
But I just want to know, what do you think the reason for that is, though? I mean, that is just a lack of that is a lack of people on the ground. Thus, we've had your reliance on voluntary services to help most of these people. Is that, is that austerity? Is that cuts? Is that just not really caring that much about this part of the community compared with the majority of fairly well-to-do people in Kensington and Chelsea?
I don't think that's fair, and I think if you look at the quantity of donations of food and clothes and money that has come in, much of it from people throughout the whole of Kensington and Chelsea, I think there's a very strong sense of solidarity. What actually went wrong at the time is not something for me to preempt now. I'd just say that obviously the organisation was faced with a challenge, the scale of which it didn't immediately recognise. We have to start by acknowledging that and then ask where we go from there.
Yeah.
And I think that's the sort of issue we need to think about.
I can take your point on that, but you were one person who felt that Nicholas Paget-Brown should go.
Yes, I did.
You weren't just saying that because of the handling of the meeting with the press last week, were you? Did you feel that the handling, the visibility, the way it had all been dealt with had been adequate up to then?
No. What I think motivated me finally to say something, because he clearly didn't want to go of his own volition, was the fact that the team that has been running the aid and support effort, which represents the London Civil Emergency Response Team drawn from all boroughs and other agencies, responsibility for that is to be handed over back to the council in the course of the next week or so, according to his statement. And I simply didn't think it was remotely credible that you could go to the people of North Kensington and say the people now responsible for your aid and support are the people you felt let them down. And there had to be a change at the top in order to for the council to stop being defensive and start owning the errors that it made. Now, where you go from there, I think, the call for commissioners to be appointed, these are things, this is not an outrageous or unreasonable thing to say, but it is coming very much from, if you like, the top, the senior figures in the Labour Party. I don't hear any calls for that coming from the local Labour councillors who represent this area, and who I think haven't sufficiently been brought into.
But what would be wrong if it was to help? You've already raised that if responsibility is increasingly going to be coming back to the council quite soon, or that was the intention under Nicholas Paget-Brown's leadership, that wasn't going to be something that it gave you confidence. What's wrong with the council having support and other people coming in there working alongside? They're not taking over, they're working alongside.
Absolutely. That is, as Andrew said earlier, that is absolutely right. The council does welcome support. And remember, behind this, above all this, you have the government. The government is not walking away from all this. There's still a task force. The government is looking very carefully at it. There are lots of agencies out there from the government, DVLA, Home Office, passport people. I'm not suggesting these people are walking off the job. And they shouldn't. We need that help. But the call for commissioners is actually a call, in effect, for the abolition of the council as a political entity, in the same way that happened when Tower Hamlets fell into the hands of people who
so it's
were
the same way, and
themselves
is it politically motivated? The calls for it are politically motivated.
I'm not going to say that, but it's not coming.
You kind of just did almost, didn't you? You said it was coming. Well, let's just put it to Clive.
I'm saying it's not coming from local.
Let me put it to Clive effort that it has come from Labour politicians.
What local people is, they want to have their voice heard. It's not necessarily the case. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
They're not saying impose people on us from outside and so
they need
their voice.
Take that on. They're not saying that, Clive Efford, says Daniel Moylan.
I mean, they are. They're absolutely saying they have no confidence in the local authority, and they have said that they want something done about that. But what they did say in response to Sadiq's call, which I think was a perfectly reasonable thing in the circumstances, was for them, the local people, to be consulted about who came in and took over in the interim, because they have absolutely no confidence in the current administration. And I'll ask Daniel, you called for the leader of the council to stand down. You thought it was time for him to stand down. What's your plan? Who replaces them? Who is the person who you have confidence in, who can restore confidence of Kensington and Chelsea?
Just very quickly, I want to bring Andrew.
There's going to be.
Well, you have no name.
No, I'm not going to pre-. There's going to be an election process in the next few days. Look, Clive, the council, like all political parties, all political groups, all local authorities, the council has to earn and deliver trust. It has to. You're not entitled to trust. The council has to be given, in my view, as an institution which will be there for years to come, people to come, has to be given the chance to do that. One of the worries I have about appointing government commissioners to run this is that you deny and delay the opportunity for that reconciliation, if you like, between the council and the people who've been badly affected.
Can I?
And I think that chance should be given, but it's got to be earned. And if it's not earned, then of course that something will have to happen.
Andrew, can I ask you what you make of this from afar?
This could have happened in any council. It could have happened in Greenwich. It could have happened in Havering. The fact that it happened,
Why?
Because this is years of mismanagement and complacency, not particularly by KNC, but I think lots of councils have also got to look at their safety.
So it could happen anywhere because of years of complacency and attitude, which government and lack of investment would you?
In local government, but also from national government of all parties. So let's stop name and shaming people and pointing the finger in a political way. Let's actually look at long-term solutions to ensure that these sort of things never happen again. That's what people want us to do, to make sure that we never have this horrific situation again. I don't want to turn this into a political argument. I want to talk about how we solve this for the future and make sure our people are safe in whichever borough they live.
Look, this was a huge tragedy that occurred, and it would have overwhelmed the resources of any local authority. That is why it's important that local authorities show their ability to work with other local authorities. On the next day after the Grenfell fire, local authorities were ringing Kensington and Chelsea, offering assistance.
Questions to answer there? Do you accept?
And they didn't respond.
Do you accept questions to answer there and their response?
I think when the Prime Minister said there was a failure of the state at all levels, that was probably one of the things that she was thinking about. That'll come out further in an inquiry. But I think, yes, that was a failure.
Do you not accept and think that what this has reflected is just what was pre-existing, a failure to actually reach out to this community? So there was no sense of resilience, no relationships there which enabled this Conservative authority and leadership to cope?
Actually, I think you would have had, perfectly frankly, I think the council would probably have made the same errors of judgment if the fire had taken place in a tower block in any part of the borough, because the scale of the disaster actually overwhelmed the council and they did not think it through correctly. And that was a fault. That was an error. There were failings. I'm not here to say everything went well, but I don't think it was related to the fact that it was this tower as opposed to another tower.
OK. Well, Daniel, thanks very much indeed for coming in. Clive and Andrew, to you too. Thanks very much.
Thank you.